Hello, everybody. Welcome to Life After Death and Beyond with James from Praagh and my good friend Kelly White. Hello,
hi, everybody.
Kelly White.
Hi, James.
I have a new opening of the podcast, which will be happening next week because we want it a little more exciting and go for it. So we're going to do that next week. It'll be ready. It's beautiful. So
we're going to have it. Is. I've seen it.
Yeah. It's really beautiful. And Kelly's coming out with a new book, which will be next month.
I am the first week. The first week in September will be up for pre-sale, and the second week it will be ready to go. So I'm so excited about it.
All right, today's date is the 20th. Is it 19th?
19th. Today's the super moon.
Right. So if everyone's listening to this another time, we're recording this on August 19th of 2024, and it is a time we have what's called the super moon. And Kelly, you want to tell everybody what that means? That's a blue moon.
It's a blue moon. It's a super moon, which means it's the closest to Earth, and it's a very powerful full moon. So tonight is really a great time to set your intentions, to have gratitude, to maybe meditate, to get as grounded as you can. It's a very important day because this full moon, James, won't occur again until the year 2037.
Wow.
So it's a big full moon. You'll feel the energy.
I already do.
Do you already feel it?
Wobbly like crazy. And Kelly, it's very important that people send out their thoughts and, as you say, grounding themselves, setting their intentions, because everything will be amplified.
Yes.
More.
Especially emotions.
Yes, it'll be a very emotional magnification. So thinking, manifesting about certain emotional things or healing would be good right now. Healing the emotions would be really, really powerful for everybody.
It's a wonderful time for healing because it's actually in Vedic astrology, it's in the nakshatra called Dhanishta, which actually represents music and harmony and celebration and healing.
And healing. And what I do tonight, I'm planning on doing it, and I do most full moon, but this one especially, I have a moonlight garden that I do a ceremony in. But tonight, really healing not only for the property and the space, but within the house. A little meditation for everybody to do is imagine this luminosity of the moonlight coming into the windows of your house, and that moonlight just gathering any energies which are not in balance, anything needs to be cleared out and cleansed. And see that light, like luminosity, cleansing through the entire space, through every corner of your rooms that you go through, in each room. And I'd go to each room and just like really do a whole little ceremony in each room and just sweep away any past energy and bring that new luminosity in each room.
What a great idea.
Yeah, it's a great time to do it.
Perfect time to do that. Well, we also have an amazing guest tonight.
An amazing guest we waited to have, and it's Laurie Schneider. And Kelly, tell us about Laurie, because she's a little bit in your wheelhouse, a little bit in my wheelhouse.
Yes, in both of our wheelhouses. You know, I've always said that for therapists, that therapy just alone is not enough. I've always said that. You know what, you need to do other things along in your therapy practice. And I've always believed that spirituality should be number one with this. Yeah. So let's talk about Laurie Schneider, because I think she's amazing. She's a psychotherapist that has integrated family systems, hypnotherapy, dream work, which I'm so excited to talk to her about dream work, and her pioneering method, and it's called Taropty. So imagine therapy and Taropty is what it's called. And it's a highly effective method of spiritual psychology and spiritual psychotherapy. So it's dream work and Taropty actually access inner wisdom, creative imagination, and higher consciousness for guidance, healing, and problem solving. And Lauren has a private practice in Santa Barbara, but she facilitates all kinds of workshops and trainings and ongoing groups for healing practitioners. And she writes articles on therapy. And she's written a fabulous book, which I have, called Taropty.
Taropty, there it is.
It's all in the cards, a pathway to inner wisdom, divine guidance, and profound healing. And she's a gold medal winner from Living Now Book Awards. So she's really extraordinary, and I'm so excited to bring her tonight to our show. So please welcome Laurie Schneider.
Hey, Lauren. Welcome, Lauren.
Hi,
welcome.
Lauren.
Thank you so much. I'm so delighted to be with both of you. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you on because, again, as I mentioned, I feel that therapists need to incorporate spirituality. I mean, it's something that I've done from the beginning. And James, you've always
Yeah,
promoted
always. We wear many
spirituality.
hats. So I was going to be a psychologist years ago. I was going to study psychology before I did anything mediumistically. And Lauren, when did you get started? How did you get started? What was your background like for everybody that's listening?
Oh, whoa, whoa. Let me go. It depends how far back we go. So,
Okay.
grad, I was training as a film theorist. I was training in something called semiology, which was looking at the images in films and stories through the lens of psychotherapy, through the lens of psychology.
Wow.
And then I ended up in production. Did not love the way that people were treating each other. And I ended up leaving my job, what I thought was my career in film, with absolutely no idea what I was going to do. I had just ended my job in film. I ended a love affair. My house was going to be sold. So I had no job, no home, no boyfriend. And I was completely open. And that summer, I was standing in a bookstore and this stranger started to talk to me. And he was clearly a wanderer and he had this yellow book and he talked to me for 10 minutes. He said that the Chinese had studied nature in such detail that they understood the laws of the universe and that these patterns, we could understand these patterns through relationships, through politics, through everything. At the end of the 10-minute conversation, he handed me his book and he said, "You're supposed to walk with this." And this was the book of the I Ching, ancient book of Chinese wisdom, with the foreword by Carl Jung. I had no idea what I'd been handed. And 2 weeks later, somebody handed me tarot in exactly the same way and said, "You're supposed to walk with this." And at the end of that summer, I walked into a master's program in marriage and family therapy with tarot in one pocket and the I Ching in the other, having no idea what these divination tools were.
Wow.
So I didn't actually end up studying the tarot tradition. I just started to experiment and say, well, what if I take what I'm learning in family systems and play with the cards? What happens if I take all my training as a hypnotherapist and play with the cards? And I started to realize when people are shuffling, they're putting themselves into a trance. When we're looking at the cards, the metaphors are coming right out of the unconscious. And they are being guided by these images to see what their unconscious blocks are and also to see what their unconscious is offering to them as a pathway to healing and wholeness. And I was having what I started finding, first of all, and I say this in the book, I kept my license separate from my therapy practice. Initially, I kept my therapy separate from my therapy practice because I thought my license might get burned at the stake metaphorically.
I know that thought.
Don't do that. Yes,
I
don't do that one.
think, Kelly, you and I have talked about this fear of actually
Sure.
visibly doing this work. But I would have such profound experiences every time I do it that I would find in one session, and I know you know this, James, I would get more information. You both know this, more information, more insight, and profound shifts in one session that would take months to years of therapy. And exactly what the issue would be would come out right in the moment. No matter how much somebody might be trying to defend, the issue would come out in the image. So I would just be so inspired by these experiences that I couldn't stop. Even if I got rolled eyes from clients, I couldn't stop.
And was
And
it just a tarot card, a regular tarot card deck you were starting with? Or was it just
well,
images you had?
so therapy is a bit different than traditional tarot. In that, again, I started to discover when I was doing my master's thesis in using tarot as a tool of psychotherapy, 1985.
Wow.
I discovered that if people picked a deck, if I gave them a whole array of decks and they chose the deck, they would have more emotional resonance with the images, but also the synchronicity would be uncannily accurate. I can give you a quick story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So a woman came to see me when I was still keeping my practice separate. She was in her 60s. She was clearly very anxious about her sons, but she wouldn't divulge any information. And I showed her an array of decks. She picked a deck and she picked a card for the problem. Now, this was the moon card, which I know you both would know. In the moon card, and I usually use the Rider-Waite deck. Most of us recognize the Rider-Waite deck. Most tarot readers will use it. It's the most popular.
Mhm.
And their images are the most typical of any tarot deck. So I use that as my control deck. Part scientist, I'm trying to show what would happen if we just used the Rider-Waite. But the deck she picked was called the Karma Tarot deck. And in this deck, the moon card, instead of having two towers, two structures, or two houses, as you would see in any other moon card, it had two wine bottles. Now, if something jumps out at me in an image, I know that there's an unconscious communication. And so I simply asked, is there a drinking problem in the family? Well, both sons were alcoholic and the husband had died of it. And so we got right into the problem.
Wow.
So I'm using about 40 decks.
Wow.
And
Great story.
people, I'm also using a technique that I developed to have people asking their unconscious what they need to know. So when somebody comes in for a session, I will ask them, they'll start by talking about what's brought them in. And then I will ask them to take a deep breath, go inside, and ask yourself how many cards you need to look at. And they'll get a number. So the unconscious is giving them a code. And then I will ask them to take another deep breath. How are they laid out on the table? Well, now we're laying the map of our unconscious on the table. And then I will ask them one by one to look at which card, which diagram calls their attention. Take a breath. What word comes up for that placement? So that we're literally creating a map of their unconscious and laying it out on the table. And then I will ask them to pick however many decks they want, as many decks as they have cards in their diagram, and then they will shuffle the decks and lay out the cards. They might have 5 cards from 5 different decks, and yet you get a completely cohesive story of what's going on.
Wow.
Now, when you say cohesive story, would the client know the story, or would you be able to tell them the story from what you're getting from the pick from that selection?
It's a dialogue. So
Okay.
I'm going to ask them which image attracts their attention first, and then we'll begin to reflect on it.
Okay.
And I'll give you another example. So somebody, and your audience can do this, this is a great way to start therapy, which is that you pick a deck that attracts you, or 2 decks. You pick a card for the problem and then a card for the solution. And
Great.
start out that simply.
Like
And
that.
I don't approach the images with any preconceived ideas. I mean, having worked with therapy now 40 years,
Right.
I do know what archetypal meanings are of different cards, but I'm approaching them not with those preconceived definitions, but rather allowing the images to just jump out at us, the details of the images. So I'm looking particularly at the details, and I will ask somebody, for example, a woman who came in was very depressed, and she picked a card from the Paris Tarot, and there was a big image of Napoleon, and then there was a checkerboard and a chess set. And so the chess set jumped out at me, and I asked her, is chess meaningful to you? And she said, oh, yes. My father taught all of us chess, me and my siblings. And then I said, well, there's a very large picture of Napoleon here. Does a dictator mean anything to you? And she said, oh, yes, my father was a dictator.
Wow.
He would come.
So how much, Lauren, would you say is measurable psychically, intuitively, and also symbolically? Because I sense that you're very intuitive as well, that stuff you're getting on intuitive level very much so as well.
Well, what I would say, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, what I would say is that there's a continuum. So on the one end, this is a great projective tool, right?
Yeah.
Images are the language of the unconscious. So if we lay images on the table and we begin to ask people about them, they're going to project themselves into those images, and we're going to get a whole lot of information. And that's just looking at it as a projective tool and just following where the images lead. And then this story will unfold. But on the other end of the scale, there is this uncanny, mystical thing that happens, which is synchronicity.
Yeah.
What is synchronicity, Lauren? What do you think synchronicity is? I want to ask you that.
So I actually, well, I have so many thoughts going at once. Let me think if I can catch the beginning. I think that synchronicity is actually awakening us to what's happening all the time, which is this connectivity between everything. And as I've worked therapy for many years, what I have seen, I think therapy gives physical evidence that there's no separation between psyche, our thoughts, our beliefs, our emotions, and matter. The cards were dealt.
Mm.
Ooh.
And so the synchronicity is that moment where there is, it's kind of what I call a glitch in the matrix, when we have this crack of our illusion of separation. And so we're seeing that psyche and matter are connected, my insides and my outsides, these cards fit exactly what's going on with me. Time, temporal time, and eternal time are one. And so I think that synchronicity is actually an incredibly healing moment, that when somebody has that synchronistic aha, they're having a sense of wholeness and connectedness to something
As you're
much
speaking,
larger.
sorry to interrupt you, but as you're speaking, I wrote exactly as you're speaking, recognition of the all. Exactly what you were just saying that.
It's a numinous experience. It really shakes up our the way we look and perceive reality.
Kelly, it shakes us up. I think it points out, here's who you really are.
Absolutely.
This is
It's a
really
numinous experience. Yeah.
And that's why I think it is a numinous experience. And that's why I feel like I have to do therapy over and over and over again, because I still have this very human, ordinary mindset that we're in a linear, limited space, right? And every time there is a powerful synchronicity, it breaks that illusion.
right.
And so I think we do this kind of work over and over and over again so that we can really change consciousness. And I believe that there's a reason right now that tarot and psychology are trending, that divination tools are being
Totally.
asked for and integrated into psychotherapy, because we're in a time where the material view of reality, the rational view of reality, is not sustainable.
So true.
Right.
And you
And
think
we know
maybe because we're shifting, we're speeding up in some ways, where our consciousness is shifting or changing in some way?
I believe that. I'm finding that. I'm imagining that you would be finding that as well.
Totally.
Yeah,
Totally.
and something is integrating. It's so much bigger than when I started doing this in 1983, I had no idea what I was doing. And I had no idea where it was going. I was just following inspiration. And the fact that this was so powerful, as you said, Kelly, that bringing spirituality, bringing a sacred space to psychotherapy was accelerating the healing process.
Yes.
It was so profound that I could not stop. But now to see that in 40 years, therapy and psychology is trending, we're having an integration. It's happening at a collective level. And I think about it in terms of quantum physics showing us what the mystics have known for centuries, which is that the observer and the observed are completely connected. Again, psyche and matter are connected.
Yeah. When you talk about the subconscious, I was thinking of another word for the higher self. Could that possibly be, another word, just a label? Could it be an aspect of the higher self revealing information?
Yeah, I think about it as that the deepest part of ourselves is our highest self, and that you get to see the higher self through dreams. You get to see the higher self laid out when you do the cards. And that you also don't have separation then between the higher self and higher consciousness. So I think that there's something that's happening where we have like an unconscious antenna that's picking exactly the card we need for our healing and our highest well-being. But there's also this unconscious mastermind in the process. So I think the universe is
Lauren, I think there's an
participating.
intelligence beyond our, our knowing, of course. There's such an intelligence in those realms, those worlds, that I think influence many of our lives in ways that we don't know. But I think there's such an incredible intelligence. Of course, there's got to be with the planets moving and changes of seasons and so forth. There's so much that we don't.
Exactly. I want to stop and just acknowledge. I feel like I'm with my tribe, so I'm just so
I'm thinking the
delighted.
same thing. Well, when I
Yeah.
met you, I thought that because, again, to do psychology and to bring in spirituality, to me, it's a match made in heaven.
Yeah, and you're a pioneer in that, Kelly, and
And so are you.
yeah, and I think that therapy is the cutting edge of psychotherapy, and so to come back to what you were saying, James, that we're bringing a higher consciousness into the psychotherapy process, and I want to just talk about that for me personally as a therapist for a moment. I grew up with early childhood dysfunction, as I think many of us therapists did, and it brought us into
Sure. We all
brought
do.
us into our careers. I think these are our initiations, but they definitely make us, certainly made me want to focus on family systems and healing as my career. But because of that early childhood wiring, I also was wired to feel overly responsible for my clients, thinking that I was supposed to heal them. I was supposed to know exactly what to do in that therapy session that was going to be the perfect healing solution. And it's a great, um, it's just a great path to burnout. And I
Yeah.
burned out. And I was doing therapy at the same time and again, having remarkable experiences. But I left my practice in 2017, my traditional psychotherapy practice. I came back in 2020 just doing therapy and dream work because it's not all on me.
Right.
I don't feel that over responsibility. It gets disengaged when I'm doing therapy and dream work because my highest self is being invited into the room, is activated. There's a higher consciousness that's being brought in as a third party to the process. I don't have to know how to heal somebody. Those
Lauren, you created a sacred space for the experience.
Yeah,
That's really
exactly.
important. That's really important.
Really
Exactly.
important. I do have a question here. Would therapy help heal any subconscious trauma, maybe from a past life?
Absolutely. Again, I'm going to use myself as an example. I grew up in West LA. I'm Jewish. And the myth in my family is that whatever happened in Europe had nothing to do with us.
Oh, wow.
Oh, boy.
Wow.
That myth kept going for quite a long time.
Wow. That's amazing.
It began to come up in dreams and in therapy that there was Holocaust history. And that began to show me why my family had the kind of dysfunctions that they did, that we were talking about generational trauma, and that we were talking about ancestors who are not at peace. So therapy very often will bring up the family system. It'll be right there on the table. The ancestral history will come up. Cards will come up. Like I had a card recently from a new deck I'm using called Divine Nature, which is a divine deck. And a card came up that had an angel coming down saying, know your value on a sign. But the people that were looking up were like survivors. They were in black and white.
Wow.
They were emaciated.
Wow.
The cards began to show me that my thought process was not just because of me, but was ancestors that were speaking through me. And it came up in the cards. That's how I began to get a clue and began to work with my ancestral history.
Well, I'm so glad that you did that, because in family constellation therapy, we go back 13 generations behind us, and if it's not worked on or dealt with, that you bring it 13 generations in front of you. So I love this, the way you do therapy to help with the generational traumas that come in.
Exactly. And also, I think that I can probably say this in a more collective way. I think we're also dealing with collective generational trauma. That's what we're experiencing now in this country, which is that our collective injuries, our collective events as perpetrators and victims has not been resolved. So it's coming up in the kind of chaos we're experiencing and social political upheaval. Well, this will come right into the cards. So I run a monthly group. My group members will lay out, as I said, like 5 cards, 5 different decks, 6 cards, 6 different decks. And whatever is going on, they may be asking about something personally, but collectively, we're seeing images of what's happening in our world, in our country, in our zeitgeist. So when Russia and Ukraine happened, there was an image with a black military person and a black boot on the head, somebody. And on the other side of the layout, there was a man playing cello, and you could see the universe through the cello. So what we had was the toxic masculinity, and then we had the gentle healing masculine. And you'll see this in these layouts. It's uncanny. Like you'll see 3 masculine figures on one side, and then you'll see 3 feminine figures on the other. That's another thing about therapy that I discovered, is that people will come in with fragmented, they come in feeling fragmented. They come in feeling like they are not whole. And yet, when I ask how many cards you need to see and how they're laid out, there is this perfect order that comes out on the table. And
Lauren,
this perfect
I have a question for you. In that therapy, because you're very insightful, you really are. Can you train people or teach people to do this to the level that you're at? I know that's hard when the answer, but maybe scratching the surface.
I will say yes, absolutely. I can train people to do therapy.
But does it rely on their analytical skills, their psychic skills? Is it a little bit of both? They have to be very left brain. Is it a mixture of right brain, left brain? What do you say?
I think it's a mixture of right brain, left brain. Obviously, I'm bringing years of training as a psychotherapist to it.
Yeah.
But the people that are attracted to to the work, are going to bring their own development into it.
Sure.
They're going to bring their own particular lens into it. I have people that are ecotherapists dealing with nature coming.
Wow.
Then they can put it into that model. Somebody who's a astrologer, she put therapy into the astrology model. Had somebody else training who was director of a inpatient teenage residential program, and she began to use it with families, and all of a sudden, reticent teenagers were opening up with their families, and the families are talking about the family dynamic.
Wow.
So I believe that therapy is a way of opening up to your own intuition, which we all have, and strengthening that muscle, strengthening your intuition, and also using everything that you, the person who's wants to learn this, are bringing to it. And then it is tapping into your inner wisdom, your highest self, so that there's an awakening that starts happening. Now, as I said, it's a process. It doesn't happen as quickly for everybody, but I find that when I start to teach therapy, the same thing happens that happens with synchronicity, is that people begin to have these profound experiences, and it enlivens the unconscious. It activates the unconscious. It stimulates it. When we stimulate the unconscious, we become more alive. And then it also awakens this connection, this intuition, this higher self. Also, image as the root of imagination, right? It stimulates imagination. So all of a sudden, creative solutions start coming up spontaneously. And so I find that I really do know how to teach this method in a way that's broken down bit by bit how I learned it.
Well, Lauren, I just got to tell you that
And
I said before about the sacred space. I think you're generally a teacher, and I think not only do you create the sacred space, but you teach, you give the space, you create that space for people that say who are learning from you. You create a space for them to go to explore, to open up to, which they might not have ever before. So you're creating that space for them as well. I just got to say that to you because I think you are.
And Lauren, don't you have a class coming up on August 31st, I think you said, to teach people how to do this?
yes, actually, I've decided to do that because of the podcast.
Oh, you'll be busy. You should have 2 classes.
Yeah, no, I just thought, with this podcast coming up just at this perfect time, I'm going to add another workshop. So on
You
the
should, huh?
31st, I'll
You
do a
should.
workshop. Yeah, from
You're a
10 to
great
1.
teacher. You're a great teacher, and people need
Thank you.
need your expertise.
Thank you. And also, I approved now by the board. First, I was approved by the Board of Behavioral Science, and then I had to go get approval again from CAMFT, our
It's a big deal. So she can actually teach continuing education classes for people out there
yes,
that have a license. It's extraordinary that you can do that.
That's incredible. You can do that.
It's amazing, and it's hard to get approved by that, James. Really tough. So, Lauren, could you show people? Could you give people an example of what they can do if they have cards at home that maybe they could do with their own therapy session tonight or tomorrow, especially with this amazing supermoon?
Oh,
absolutely.
great one, Kelly. Great question.
Yeah, that's a perfect time. So maybe a perfect question would be, what's my highest purpose? Or what's my greatest vision? And you might want to also ask, what gets in the way of that? So I would start with 2 cards because you don't want to overwhelm yourself. And I usually will start with, what's the problem? What's the solution? Again, because it is a super moon, what is my highest purpose? What's the highest vision for me? And then we need to look at what's getting in my way, right? So you lay out those 2 cards and then start by looking at one, whichever one attracts your attention, and just start to notice the details in the image. And what do those details evoke for you? What is it like emotionally to notice that detail? What does that feel like? What do I associate to it? What if I have a character, let's say, in the card? What's the stance? What's the personality of this character? How does this character live in their world? And if I can start to feel into that, how does this character look at my situation? Would they say to me, you could do some automatic writing? Okay, I notice this character. You seem very strong. You seem very powerful. I don't associate myself with you. I'm not that powerful. Write everything that you want to write that's coming up. And then when you feel a natural pause, turn the pen over to the character and have the character write back to you.
Great.
And you'll find that you're going to get some really amazing insights from this character's point of view. How would you look at my situation? What would you do? How would you go through my day? And then you begin to walk with these characters. They become allies. They're not just 2-dimensional drawings on a card. They come alive as we give them attention, and they can become allies. I'll give you another example. A woman I was working with pulled cards. we're at the Karma Tarot again, but she got the Emperor. Now, the Emperor that we would see in most cards is going to be in Renaissance garb and sitting on a throne. But this guy was called Osiris. And Osiris was a good king who was murdered by his brother. And then his wife brought him back to life, but in the underworld.
Mm.
So she realized that Osiris was this numinous figure, a king, an emperor, in her unconscious. And she began to write stories to him and have him write back. She began to write mythologies. She created an altar for him. She would bring him wine in the evening. And Osiris, she began to sleep better than she had ever slept. Osiris began to woo her as she wooed him. And she began to have this extraordinary creativity just bursting out of her because she had gotten into a relationship. So I'm suggesting to people that you start with, what does this detail mean to me? And then try to feel into it. What does it feel like in my body? What kind of emotions do I have around this image? And then begin to write to them or bring it into your day. Keep it with you every day and see what comes up day to day living with this image.
Great exercise.
Well, thank you for that one. So I want another question. I have another question about dream work. So I know that your work, you deal a lot in dream work. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I've been focusing primarily on therapy because I feel like it's a very unique tool and because it's uniquely my method of working as a psychotherapist. I felt it was really important to be training psychotherapists, but I have to say I miss dream work because when you listen to a dream with somebody, James.
Oh, I'm sure he'll be right back. I think something happened. Mercury retrograde, is it what happened?
Even a nightmare, you will hear the unconscious solving what's ever going on. So, for example, during the pandemic, anxiety quadrupled. Actually, went more than that. And people were having a lot of nightmares, and they were having pandemic nightmares. And there were a lot of colleagues of mine studying the pandemic nightmares and writing about them for magazines. But they weren't paying attention to, well, where's the medicine? So, for example, somebody had a dream. She had a COVID dream in which she went into a bathroom and it was filthy and it was scary to touch anything. And she said, oh, this is a nightmare, and was just going to write it off to anxiety. But then as she was describing the dream to me, she said, under the sink, there were butterflies.
Oh, wow.
So now we're looking at, well, underneath this pandemic is something transformational happening. And so when you listen to dreams, there is this wisdom of the unconscious that's offering you your own evolution, offering you solutions, offering you medicine. So I just love listening to dreams because, again, if I'm listening to people in therapy, I'm just staying at their conscious understanding of what's going on. But the minute we drop into the dream, there is this incredible wisdom. If I have time, can I tell one other quick story?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a family systems therapist. So a woman came in who was trying to decide whether her marriage was over. She had had an affair during the summer, and she had had an experience that was more emotionally intimate and sexually intimate than she had ever had with her husband. So she really thought the marriage was over. And when we talked about it for several months and talked about it every which way. And it felt like, yeah, she came to the conclusion this was the end of the marriage. And then she had a dream. And in the dream, she was invited to go to the basement. So she made this rather difficult journey down several staircases down to the basement where all these cooks were. And there were all these sumptuous smells. And there was this really large woman cook, and she gave her this long tray filled with food and said, carry this back upstairs with your husband. That's a little phallic, right? But it was just filled with food. And the woman said, my husband's not paying attention. And she turned around and her husband was there. And the cook said, that's right, carry this back upstairs with your husband. So I reflected on the dream to her and I said, I know that it appears that your marriage is dead, but the cooks know what's cooking, right?
Right.
She went down to the basement where the
Right.
cooks know what's going on. And this cook said that everything that you have gotten from this incredible, deep, intimate experience is meant to be carried back into conscious life with your husband. So she left not knowing what she was going to do. And she called me a couple months later and just thanked me and said, my husband and I have fallen in love again and are having a deeper relationship than we've ever had.
Wow.
I would never have known that if it weren't for the dream.
Wow.
That's her wisdom telling me what she needs.
So
Do
true.
you like dream journals? Should people have dream journals?
I do.
I do.
I love.
I think it's
Do you?
necessary. Oh, yes. And I think sometimes, Lauren, if we put out the intention that we have our dream journal next to us, that we will bring into the conscious more of the dream. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that dreams, I mean, there's a reason we call it the unconscious.
Right.
They will slip back into the unconscious if we don't pay attention. So I agree. I think we need to put a journal, piece of paper, a pen next to our bed. I get lazy sometimes, a phone to record. In the morning when we wake up, if we can just spend the first few minutes just mulling over whatever we wake up with, whatever feelings, whatever image, whatever thoughts, and then just write that down. And if we continue to do that over a couple of weeks, we'll start capturing dreams again.
And I find it very healing. Like if there's an issue or a situation going on, whether it's me personally or someone in my space or someone that I know, I find that the intention of remembering the dream, and it could be, I want to have a healing dream, whatever it could be, I find just getting that out in that paper, having that recognition totally opens up that space and provides a healing on many levels.
Do you write what's going on for you, or write your intention?
In the dreams, yes. In the dreams, I write what's going on. I don't do the symbology, but I write exactly what I've observed in the dream. And sometimes that doesn't make sense at all, which is just fine. But I will write down everything I can recall. And some dreams are more vivid than other dreams, of course. And of course, there are different types of dreams. But I like that sense also, that twilight state, right before you're in the conscious. It's so great. Kelly, you have a lot of dreams, don't you?
I do. And some of the dreams are, prophetic dreams. Some of the dreams are visitation dreams. Some of the dreams I'm working things out.
Yeah. It's very interesting.
I'm wondering if you also notice collective dreams, dreams about what's going on in our larger world.
Let's talk about that. Yes. Yes. I know that, Lauren, you had mentioned earlier before we got on live about that. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, I said I feel very compelled to be writing a dream blog now because I've been having profound dreams and tracking my dreams for 40, 50 years. And I don't want to write a how-to blog, but rather talk about this extraordinary multidimensional intelligence that we have in dreams, that's telepathic, that's precognitive, that is what I call the psychic internet. That when we're asleep, we have no boundaries in time or space. So we're picking up things just like the internet. So I began to have very profound dreams in the late 90s. I began to have whale dreams. And I wrote an article that is in a book called Healing with Nature in Mind about the whales. And I talked about it as a symbol, but I also said, I think the whales are trying to communicate with us because who better than the whales know what's happening in the ocean, in our environment? These are sentient beings. And with their sonar communication, maybe they're trying to wake us up in our dreams. Well, then in 2012, I began to have dreams like the the Empire State Building was going to be knocked over by a tsunami. And then I was in the ocean, and I said, oh, so this is what it's like to die. If I close my eyes, it'll all be peaceful. It's only the transition that's scary.
Mm.
That's a very important line. So I woke up saying, oh, the state of the empire is collapsing. It's being knocked off its foundation. Now, when we look at the political, social upheaval we've been experiencing, I've been watching exactly what the dreams have been talking about. But there's that very important, again, wisdom that came into the dream, which is it's only the transition that's scary. We're in a huge transition.
It's true. Yeah.
And that when we see sociopolitical upheaval, we know that there's a much bigger consciousness shift happening. And
very true.
Very true, Lauren. Thank you. Wow.
Yeah.
Time is clicking by here, unfortunately. Kelly, any last questions you'd like to ask Lauren? Or
well, Lauren, so how do people reach you?
yes,
Because I know, are you doing private sessions? Are you teaching?
I hope you are.
I'm doing private sessions. I do several monthly groups. I'm in the middle of a training right now. I'll start a new training in January of the new year. It's a training and certification program. If people want to become therapy practitioners, I certify them. They can reach me through my website, which is dreamsandtherapy.com. They can also email me at laurenz@dreamsandtherapy.com. I also want to say that I really encourage people to read the book because it really does teach
It's
therapy.
a great book.
Yeah,
I mean, it's got everything in this therapy. It's a great book. It's so interesting and it's so well written and it's easy to follow, Lauren.
Thank you. And I took it step by step to teach people this methodology. And so one of the ways I think about using the therapy book is the way that somebody might use the Artist's Way. Start your own group and use the book as a guideline.
The book is a very step by step. I think it's great. It's like a guidebook. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you, Lauren. Sorry it was so quick.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I'm so
really
glad you got to
appreciate
be
your
on
time
tonight.
and looking forward to seeing you again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Kelly. Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
James.
Thanks, Renee.
Good night, everybody.
Bye, everyone.